Good morning. Thank you for joining us for today's Insurance Data Lab webinar. I'm Dan King, and today we'll be discussing the key factors shaping broker placement decisions in today's insurance market, from insurer performance and claims outcomes through to customer expectations, regulation, and the evolving broker-insurer relationship. For those who are new to Insurance Data Lab, we provide market intelligence on the performance of insurers, MGAs, and brokers, helping firms to evidence placement decisions, improve customer outcomes, and reduce regulatory risk. Before I introduce today's panel, here's Matt Scott to talk us through the key findings from our new Insurer Performance and Conduct Report, published in association with BIBA and sponsored by SSP. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Dan. Thanks.
What was the thinking behind the report, and what were you hoping to achieve with it?
Yes, sure. So the report was designed really to address growing challenge in the market around evidencing insurer performance and supporting placement decisions. There's more data really available than ever before, but a lot of it exists in silos. So, underwriting data in one place, complaints data elsewhere, claims data somewhere else again. And that makes it really difficult for brokers to build I suppose, complete and balanced picture of insurer performance. At the same time, there's increasing demand coming from regulation and the regulatory environment since consumer duties came into place, and a greater focus really on customer outcomes, fair value, and being able to evidence through product governance why a particular insurer was selected for a particular risk. So we wanted to create a more, I suppose, joined up framework for assessing insurer performance. And that's why we launched the Insurer Performance Index, which underpins the report you were speaking about. And it covers four core pillars. So that's claims, complaints, solvency, and underwriting. Under that, each insurer receives a score across each of those four areas, which are then combined into an overall index score out of 1,000. We also applied RAG ratings across each pillar, just to make it easier for brokers to benchmark insurers and support placement decisions with that objective evidence. Draws on a wide range of regulatory market data sets, including value measures from the FCA, complaints data, solvency financial condition reports, and consumer intelligence claims satisfaction data. And it also includes the results of our new commercial lines claims pulse survey that we conducted with Research and Finance.
Right, and what were the key themes that emerged from the research?
Yeah, I suppose the clearest finding really was that the market's becoming increasingly polarized. So at a headline level, insurers are delivering stronger underwriting results and they're maintaining robust solvency positions, for example. But beneath those headline figures, there's a big spread between different insurers. And we see that across all four pillars. So, for example, claims acceptance rates in some home markets are as low as 20 to 25% for some insurers, where others are operating at the other end at 95 to 100% of claims accepted. Complaints data shows similar variations across the market in terms of upheld rates and volumes and also resolution times. So yeah, I'd say key message really is that averages only tell part of the story. You need to look down to the individual insurer level.
Okay, thanks. And which insurers stood out as particularly strong performers?
Yeah, so we identified a group of what we're calling Insurance Data Lab recommended insurers. So it's those insurers that achieved a green overall rating, whilst also performing consistently across all four peers. So Simply Health ranked highest, driven by a particularly strong solvency position and effective claims handling. And AIG was the highest ranked multi-line insurer in the research. Other recommended insurers include Star International, Allwyn, Sabre, Acromas, AA Underwriting, Highway, and Hiscox. And I think one of the most interesting findings really was that the highest performing insurers weren't necessarily the strongest in the individual areas or just in one area, but they were the firms delivering consistently across all four pillars. And in practical terms, I think that's important because brokers are balancing a wide range of, I suppose, competing pressures. Looking at customer outcomes, the relationships they have with the insurers, the capacity they can serve, can get, as well as service claims, the resilience of the company, but also their own commercial position. It's got to be considered as well. So yeah, I think that's the main stuff really, and it's particularly important, where customer expectations are rising, and also regulators are paying closer attention to outcomes and conduct. I think it's the firms that really combine strong relationships with the evidence part of it and data-led decision making that are going to be in the strongest position going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. So this report will be included in our June newsletter, which will be sent next week to all of you who registered to watch today's session. But if you'd like to see it before then, you can download it now from our website. So joining Matt on today's panel, we have Alex Tenidis, Chief Distribution Officer at Allianz Commercial, Alicia Royal-Evett, Head of Placement at Brown& Brown, Amy Crouch, Aviva's Head of Strategic Partnerships, and Graham Trudgell, Chief Executive of Bieber. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We'd like this to be a really interactive session if we can. So please feel free to submit questions, and I'll put as many as possible to our panelists during this session. So let's start with the changing placement environment. And Graham, from Bieber's perspective, how is the placement environment changing for brokers at the moment, and what are your members telling you about this?
Hi everyone. Thanks, Dan. I think that things change over time. I think if you go back to Brexit, prior to Brexit, security rating was a really big issue. But now, since then, I think things are much more settled. Even members can check with S&P and Litmus and other providers, security there. We're in a soft market now, so it's very competitive. There's lots of capacities more readily available. So I think some of the differentiators come down now to particularly claims. Claims handling is a big differentiator. Certainly, it's probably one of the biggest drivers of complaints, the claims handling by insurers. And so going back to when I was insurance broker, even back then, knowing that you could rely on that insurer to take the right approach to a claim was a really important point in your decision. So service is important throughout that claims process and the relationships that are part of it. And I think reading your report, Dan, what really I think got my attention more than anything else was it said that 78% of brokers lose trust after a poor claims experience. 39% of brokers are unlikely to place with that insurer after a negative experience. But importantly, 95% of brokers would return to that insurer after a positive claims experience. So, from my perspective, right now, in such a competitive marketplace with pretty good security there, a really helpful differentiator is that claims handling, that claims experience.
Great. And Alicia, how are placement decisions evolving within the large broken groups, obviously, which you represent as one of them?
Yeah, well, I think that placements become much more evidence-led, and it's not just about, access to capacity or historic relationships anymore. It's about demonstrating that, that insurer is a right fit for the client. There's a much stronger focus on the claims performance, on the financial strength, and just overall the consistency of the delivery of good customer outcomes.
Great, thank you. And with I was going to ask Alex a question, but he's disappeared. Hopefully, you can rejoin us, Alex. But in the meantime, Amy, what are you seeing about the kind of from the insurer side of the relationship, and how much of that is being driven, do you think, by market conditions?
Yeah, I suppose there's no doubt that the change in market, which to be fair has been with us now 12 to 18 months, so it's nothing new, but we are now into the second renewal cycle, I suppose, of what you might call a soft market. So it has absolutely changed the dynamics between insurer and broker, and the tone of conversation, the approach to renewals and new business. It's fundamentally changed everything. So I think a lot of what we're seeing is changing that conversation when we look at risks and presentations to this is what we need to what can we do to help, trying to get on the front foot a lot sooner with renewals, especially with the large cases, the conversation being what can we do to sort of secure a renewal now rather than perhaps allowing it to go to market. So it's a much more proactive conversation. It feels far more collaborative. And that for me has been 100% driven by the changing market conditions, which perhaps signs it's plateauing, but absolutely no signs that it's on a fundamental change anytime soon. So I think we'll continue to see these patterns of behaviour between insurers and brokers for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Amy. And Alex, welcome. I know you've had a few Zoom issues, but we're just talking. I don't know if you've been listening to much of this, but we've been talking about the kind of broker-insurer relationship and how that's been evolving. So from your point of view at Allianz, how is the way that brokers are working with insurers changing?
Yeah, great question. And sorry, our Allianz firewalls don't seem to like Zoom. We're more of a Teams team over here. So there we are. Yeah, I think there's three certainties in life, right? You've got death, taxes, and insurance market cycles. And I think when the soft cycle comes, what you tend to see is much more demanding relationships from the broker side. I think ultimately when the hard cycle's there, on average, it tends to be the inverse of that. So what we're seeing now is a flight to quality from brokers. They're looking for fewer, more strategic partnerships to drive placement, and in that soft cycle to, I guess, protect earnings as well and get the right outcomes for their clients. Ultimately, being more demanding around proposition, around facilitization, which ultimately leads to more strategic partnerships. To put that into perspective, I mean, as at May of this year, we've had as many tender requests as we did in the whole of the previous year. So ultimately, you can see that brokers are looking to facilitate more, try to drive better outcomes, and work more strategically with our insurers, which obviously we really welcome, right? We want a flight to quality, and we want to focus our energies on the partnerships where we can really win together. So yeah, that would be it for me.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's appropriate you're talking about flight to quality because I know that was talked a lot when we did our prep calls for this session. So, Amy, what are you seeing there from at Aviva?
I think, it's forcing brokers and insurers to focus more on the wider proposition. So, moving the conversation away from price and we've already talked a lot about claims. I'm sure we'll talk about that more as the session goes on, but that is got to be the key differentiator between where brokers ultimately decide to place their clients' risks, as is the wider proposition. So do you have a client relationship manager? What is your risk management proposition? I think everything in this market needs to be scrutinised and taken into account when brokers are factoring in where they want to put their clients. And that, I think, Alex is right. It's a flight to quality. I think that means that we're all levelling up, we're all upping our game, and it's becoming probably a far more quality driven marketplace than it perhaps has been. I think the other really interesting bit, so Aviva run a broker survey called Broker Barometer. So we asked brokers about a whole host of things. And one of the things that came through with the results that we've had from the recent survey is that brokers are actually using this marketplace as quite a good opportunity to address any underinsurance with their customers. Again, that's something that insurers can absolutely support with and should be supporting with. But yeah, over 82% of brokers said that in this marketplace, this is the time for them to really scrutinise the kind of the underinsurance or not of their customers and making sure that they're placed on the right basis, which should be music to all of our ears. Really, that's a great outcome for everyone involved.
Yeah, thank you. And Alicia, is this flight to quality something you're experiencing at Brown and Brown?
Yeah, 100%, completely agree with what Amy and Alex have said there. We are looking at our program of insurers. We're looking, as Amy says, definitely looking at the programs of our clients and making sure that, yes, premiums are coming down, but can we fill some of that gap with, making sure that they're buying the right covers, with the right insurers. So absolutely, there's a move towards more of a strategic alignment with our insurance. I think that's across the whole of the market. Brokers need to be able to trust the insurers that they're dealing with. We need to stand there shoulder to shoulder to ensure that it's the best outcome for all of our clients.
Great. And Graham, what does this mean for brokers then if they're working with fewer insurers? And what do you think is driving that shift?
I think one of the big drivers for working with fewer insurers is regulation, because the product value assessments that brokers have to do are very onerous. And if a broker deals with 50 insurers and 20 products per insurer, that's 1,000 of the assessments you have to do. So we've had members saying to us, actually, I've only got a couple of risks with this provider, and I'm not going to do that anymore because I'm going to focus more on my core business. So we have seen brokers moving away from some agencies. Also, we've seen some insurers say, actually, if you want to deal with us, you need to place, X £100,000 worth of business with us. And so there's been a bit of a reduction there in some of the agencies from the other side of the fence too. But of course, I think from our perspective, we're keen that insurers support those up and coming smaller brokers because they could be the bigger brokers of the future. I think also some of the changes we've seen are around the consolidation and perhaps a move since COVID of brokers to move to MGAs quite a bit more, where they've perhaps a little bit nimbler on the service after COVID, offering capacity on things that other providers weren't at that time. So it's been quite a changing time, but it's probably that 80-20 rule, isn't it? That the brokers put 80% of their business with 20% of their insurer panel. And I think having that relationship with the insurer, having the niche schemes with them, with a supportive insurer that really understands you, is very, very important for brokers right now.
Yeah, thank you. And Amy, does the changes that Graham's explained there, how does that change the way that insurers are working with broker partners?
Well, again, it definitely makes us up our game, because if brokers are becoming choosier with who they're working with, we absolutely want to be part of that conversation and part of that reduced panel. So, again, I think really positive, really drives really good customer outcomes, but means that we cannot become complacent, cannot rest on our laurels. And I think the other way that this is sort of manifesting, and is sort of the same, but we've seen certainly the global brokers, they have had a very strong facilitization strategy for a long time now, and I think we're seeing that behavior sort of, I suppose, trickle down to sort of medium to smaller brokers, where they're not only looking at broker panels, but they're also looking at maybe either customer segments or product lines, and maybe making quite targeted propositions for that. And we've seen that absolutely in the last 12 months, facilitization increasing. And again, it's sort of, it drives better customer outcomes. There is the flip side. So it puts definitely a bit of a financial impact and an operational impact on our business, because everything doesn't just go through the Aviva or Allianz or AXA sausage machine as it might have done. But we're absolutely tailoring propositions, I suppose, and using the broker expertise, either, as I said, with that product line or with that customer base, to make sure that there's a very targeted proposition, and it is just sort of upping our game to make sure that we don't get left behind with that, I suppose.
Yeah, and Alex, from your point of view, got anything to add to what Amy was saying and what Graham was saying around the kind of brokers working with fewer insurers and the other changes that leads to?
Yeah, I think Amy hit the nail on the head around everyone having to up their game in this type of marketplace. Everyone has to do more with less, and ultimately to win the race and get a place on the panel is only the first, or to work with a broker strategically as they're rationalizing is only the first step in the journey. Then really it's about how do you actually perform day in, day out, and it's pretty amazing how sometimes in our market just really getting the basics right can help you to stand out, right? Sometimes in terms of really quality service, speed of response, all those basics. But I guess the bar is being raised consistently as part of that. And I think it's driving again for relationships where we're being more demanding of each other to reach mutual objectives. So, if we want to enhance or develop a proposition or do something differently, and looking ahead, we lean on our brokers more these days. We really are more demanding of them, utilizing those expertise, really building strategic partnerships that drive a step change in performance. But absolutely, it works in the reverse as well. That's something that's quite exciting for me, because it starts to take you into different territories about the way that you work together and ultimately add value together to win in what is quite a tough marketplace.
Yeah, thank you. And Alicia, what about from your perspective as a broker? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, exactly what Amy and Alex are seeing. The insurers are stepping up, they are upping their game and making sure that they stand ahead of their peers. So, as brokers, we're looking for reliability, consistency, strong long-term customer outcomes, and that's what they're looking for as well. So I think that we've had a placement strategy since I've been with Brown and Brown for the last 10 years. But I can really see it coming into focus now, and everyone trying to make sure that the customer is at the heart and centre of this.
Yeah, we've had quite an interesting question come in, which I'm going to put to you guys, which is from Martin Hall, who's asked a good question around how can brokers ensure that insurer-appointed loss adjusters or support live up to the standards set by their insurer partners? And he's saying here, if that fails mid-claim, are brokers empowered enough to intervene to deliver that flight to quality that we've been talking about? So I don't know, Graham, if you want to pick that up, if that's okay, is it just asking about the brokers?
Sure.
Are you happy to take that?
Yeah, look, I think we see this. We see a lot of outsourcing to loss adjusters. We've got a good relationship with Scylla, and yeah, they are claims professionals there to help. So I think the broker will be looking very closely at how they're dealing with that claim. That's what part of what the broker's added value is, and they will be pushing the loss adjuster to get the reports into the insurer and get everything progressed as quickly as possible and the client back into the property or whatever the claim may be. If they feel that something's fallen short or could go faster, then they will put the pressure on. Ultimately, the insurer is responsible for that claim.
Yeah.
They're not outsourcing their responsibility to the loss adjuster. So, from my perspective, the broker will still have the red telephone hotline to the insurer, to Alex, to Amy, to say, guys, your loss adjuster's not doing what we need. Can you step in, please?
Interesting. Alicia, as the broker on the call, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a dedicated claims team that is exactly what it's there for. The broker is there to try and push along and help get the claim settled, but ultimately it is the insurer. And I guess that's why you've got a placement strategy as well, is because if there is a contention about the claim, you've got more clout behind you to try and press for a good outcome for the client in the end.
Yeah, so actually, maybe it's fair to ask Alex and Amy for their thoughts here, then, as the insurers with the power. So, how are you kind of making sure that, I suppose, that your partners, like loss adjusters, are living up to the standards that you want to set?
Yeah, I mean, we have from our side really strict SLAs around dealing with these partners. We're selective in our approach to choosing them, and we have significant relationships. Now, like in any business, things can go wrong at a transactional level, but we are constantly reviewing performance, looking at broker and client feedback, and making sure that we're factoring it into continuous improvements that we have. And look, things do go wrong, and on those occasions that they do, we've invested heavily in relationship managers in our claims functions that can resolve those quickly and make sure that we get it right and take the learnings forward, so we prevent that happening again. So, ultimately, we see them as an extension, our partners as an extension of our business, and we hold them to high standards, and just make sure that inevitably here and there where things may go wrong, that we can respond quickly and take the learnings from it.
Yeah, thank you. And Amy, from Aviva's perspective, is there anything you'd add to that?
Well, I suppose similarly to Alicia's point about the leverage that they can have with us, that's absolutely how we would see that relationship with our loss adjusters. We have, as Alex has said, very strict and demanding SLAs. We run a tight procurement process that's continually under review, and we have leverage with our partners to make sure that they're sort of living up to our high standards and what we would expect of them. So in theory, that should all play out in a really positive way. Obviously, as Alex has said, that doesn't always translate, and you do get the odd thing that falls down, but that's when I think your relationships come into the forefront, either through your BDM, your sales manager, or through your claims relationship manager, through your SAM if you're part of a strategic account. So there's many avenues into insurers, and if a broker has consolidated their panels and they have sort of got fewer but broader relationships with insurers, then that should help resolve things quite quickly. But I mean, you shouldn't even hopefully be even getting to that position. The kind of the governance and the processes that you're putting around in the first place should hopefully mean that you don't even get into that sort of negative situation.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, Martin's question is quite well timed, because we're now going to turn to claims and customer outcomes. So obviously these have always been important, but given the increased regulatory scrutiny in recent years that Graham's alluded to earlier, arguably they've never really mattered more. So Alicia, from the broker perspective, how important is that claims service provided by an insurer when deciding where to place business?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely critical, isn't it? Ultimately, it's what the client's paying for. So, and a poor claims experience can obviously, it can break a relationship with your client. So for us, it's of ultimate importance, and conversely, a positive claims experience, can really help. And it is central to our placement decisions. It builds trust with our partners, and it will, ultimately make us place more business with that market. Whereas if we have a poor experience, we're less likely, exactly the results that you found, basically.
Yeah, yeah, great. And Amy, do you have any kind of perspective from an insurer point of view on this as well?
I think, as we said, it should be, and it should always have been the key differentiator.
Mm.
It should be, it's the reason we're here, the moment of truth, whatever sort of cliched phrase you want to put around it. But what is the point if we're not, showing up when our customers need us most? So, again, going back to that survey that I referenced, it was the number one priority for brokers. So 42% of brokers cited it as their number one priority when they were kind of deciding where to place their business. And yeah, and I think it kind of puts the pressure on insurers to to be fantastic really in that sort of service delivery when it comes to claims. So yeah, well, I suppose when capacity is easy to come by, and I think we've talked about MGAs, but I think that is where brokers should really be scrutinizing their partners, and obviously you guys have done a great job at trying to make that a little bit easier for brokers to try and compare and contrast, but it should be, in my view, that the key decision making for brokers. And again, I could talk about what we've done, but that's why we're trying to in-house, I suppose, as much as possible. We have a solely owned repair network for motor repairs. We've got 40 sites across the UK. We've recently bought disaster care, which was kind of another attempt by us to in-house and kind of speed up response to major disasters. Because we recognise that, yeah, this is kind of the reason that we're all here, and it is of increasing importance to brokers and their customers.
Yeah, thank you. And Graham and Matt have both alluded to this earlier on in the session, but the new research that we conducted earlier this year with Research and Finance asked brokers to rate the claims experiences that they've had with their commercial line insurer partners. Alex, turning to you because Allianz, congratulations. Allianz came out as one of the top performers in this research. So Allianz won an Insurance Data Lab Gold Award alongside Beazley, Travelers, AIG, Hiscox and Markel. So what do you think you're doing well, and what do you think brokers are valuing the most in a strong claims proposition?
Yeah, I mean, we really appreciate the recognition, and it's an area of our business that we take huge amount of pride in and invest heavily in for all the reasons that the other panelists have mentioned. I think it's really simple at the end of the day. When a claim comes through, we need to be quick. We need experts that are responding, and we need to settle as ultimately as fast as we can, right? And just that guides us day in and day out. When I'm in the pub and being the bore that I am, and I start to talk about insurance with mates, the stories I love to tell are like where we had an SME client where we received the notification that their car had been stolen at 10:15, and we settled the claim at 10:50. So 35 minutes later, client is arriving back on their drive in a taxi, and their claim has been settled, right? And I think like for a stolen vehicle, a client that needs that vehicle to run their business and whatnot, like for me, they're the moments of truth that Amy was talking to, and they're the proof points of our proposition where we're fast, we get it right with experts, and ultimately make the settlement in a way that works for brokers and clients. And that's where we get the really positive feedback.
Great, thank you. And Amy, Aviva also came out strongly in our research. Do you have anything to add to what you said earlier or to what Alex has just said there?
No, but I suppose we would never be one to rest our laurels or become complacent, and it certainly in this market you can't afford to. So I think we are constantly challenging ourselves, constantly looking at where we can improve, and investing in our claim service. And yeah, it, like Alex said, that's those moments of truth when you get some absolutely unbelievable stories, and that's kind of the reason that you're here. They're kind of that they make you really proud basically to work in this industry. So but hopefully, I don't know if this is an annual review of claim service, and we'll look to increase our position next year, because I think as I said, you cannot afford to be complacent or kind of ignore the trends or not improve your game.
Yeah, no, thank you. We're actually aiming to update the research every 6 months and keep topping it up. So it'll be interesting to see how the scores evolve over time. But Matt, we've already kind of touched on some of the key findings of the research, but is there anything else you wanted to tell us about what the research told us?
Yeah, sure. Well, Graham stole my thunder a bit with the biggest finding really there with the kind of the impact on, trust and business placement. So I think that shows the importance of claims really with, brokers who've had a good experience almost 10 times more likely to place business with that insurer again compared to those who had a bad experience. But also building on Martin's question earlier, that the lowest rated kind of area of the claims process in the survey was actually third party management, so managing those third parties, and I think that shows it as an area where maybe there could be some more improvement that would help bring up the service overall. So I think there's important work to be done there. And the other one was, I suppose, on technology, where that third party management had 66% satisfaction compared to 77% for overall. And then the other one, digital portal, at that initial notification was only 67% satisfied. So quite a bit lower than all of the other pillars, really. I think that shows maybe an area where there could be a bit more work to improve the outcome for brokers and the end customer. So that's probably the key findings I'd talk about there, really.
Okay, thank you. Graham, we've just had a question coming from Craig Polly, which has been addressed to you. So I'm going to put it to
Okay.
you. He's basically asking whether we've seen any evidence that brokers are investing more in client stroke claims advocacy and support in processing claims, which kind of touched on some of those themes we've just been talking about.
Certainly, yeah, we have a number of brokers that have, claims teams, people dedicated just to liaising with the insurers over claims and making sure that they get the right outcome. So to answer it, yes. Not in every broker. Quite a lot of brokers would, of course, rely on the insurer to a degree, because of the things like the approved repairer networks and things like that. Insurers like to take control of things like motor claims, but certainly we have a lot of brokers who appreciate that it's the shop window of their brokerage, isn't it? So it's really important. And when you see something like a which super complaint coming through, that's a really difficult read when it's coming up with the stats that it did on how few claims are being paid on household storms, for example, to the point that the FCA have created a new working group, which we sit on, about educating consumers on what they're buying and what their expectations are. The House of Lords have now got involved, and BIBA and the ABI, and I think even Data Lab are giving evidence about the claims issues there this month. So, if a claim isn't paid, that then could potentially be a claim against the broker for their professional indemnity insurance to deal with. So I think that's why, to answer the question, that's why a lot of brokers take claims more seriously than ever. A, they're there as agent of the client to make sure they get their claim paid. But B, if it doesn't get paid, it could be a claim against the broker and their PI. So it's absolutely worth the investment in the claims team.
Thanks, Graham. And Alicia, is there anything you'd like to add to that from a Brown and Brown point of view?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Graham said. I mean, we've got a whole infrastructure dedicated to claims, and it's got regional reach. So we take the claims journey very, very seriously. So yeah, I think the investment that Brown and Brown in particular have made, and I'm sure that a lot of our peers have, is substantial.
Yeah, thank you. So before we move on, just a quick reminder to put our panel under the spotlight, as Martin and Craig have just done. So we've had a few questions come in, but we'd like a few more. So please do submit them. And as long as we've got the time, I'll ask them on your behalf. Now, we can't possibly discuss business placement without also touching on regulation and product governance. So back to you, Alicia. How challenging has product governance been operationally for brokers?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it is a huge challenge, and it's significantly more demanding than it has been. I think probably in the last 18 months, Brown and Brown have invested heavily in a department to look through all of that. And as I think Graham mentioned, it's not just per insurer, it's per insurer, per product. So there is an enormous amount of resource required to be able to keep up to date. And of course, the expectation is not just to get it right at the point of sale, but obviously to keep that evidence going throughout the whole of the life of the policy, etc. So yes, it is extremely challenging, but it's extremely important as well. So I think a reason why brokers are looking at their panels and maybe streamlining them slightly, as we've alluded to previously. I think it's just we've got to have a better handle on the outcome for the client, and the products that we're selling them are fit for purpose.
Yeah, thank you. And Graham, I know you touched on this earlier, but is there anything else you wanted to say about how much pressure brokers are under to evidence fair value and good customer outcomes?
Yeah, more pressure than ever before, and that even goes to the top of the political tree, where it wasn't that long ago we had a letter from a Secretary of State, Michael Gove, saying he didn't feel the industry were giving fair value on the insurance for multi-occupancy buildings with cladding, and the threat was to even ban, commission, intervene on pricing, and it was incredibly serious. So that led Bieber to creating our Auxera Fair Value Assessment Framework and all the guides and templates around that. So that creates a system for brokers to evidence to the regulator, to their client, to politicians, to insurers, how they are delivering fair value, and they can look at what's their direct cost as the element of what their commission is. Is it the staff they have on that particular product? What's their indirect cost that they need to account for, their office cost, their PI insurance? Then what's the fair profit they can make? So having a system of demonstrating fair value is really important. So we have that now, and I'm pleased that brokers are able to do it, because in things like the market study from the FCA on premium finance, there was talk there about capping APRs and commissions and things like that. But to me, it's all about fair value, and providing you're evidencing fair value, then you should be able to demonstrate that actually that APR rate, that commission is fair to the insurer, to the client. And maybe that differs on the level of service that you give. Maybe for a commercial risk, you have your own surveyor that goes out and values every single property, things like that. So you charge for that Rolls-Royce service. So as long as you could evidence fair value, then I think that's the right thing. But that value depends on that brokerage and the type of business that they're doing, and the work that they're giving. So hugely important. There's been a big investment by brokers in making sure that they can prove to the regulator that the customers are getting fair value and good outcomes. The regulator's not going to stop looking at that. They have reviewed the scope of the consumer duty, and I'm pleased that it's taken a bit more of a sensible step down to kind of where the ombudsman limit is, so that sort of £6.5 million turnover. But that still probably covers like 98% of clients in the UK, all the personal line ones, a lot of the commercial ones. So it's not something that's going to go away in a hurry. And I think that obviously, and when we're dealing with insurers, just to bring the insurer side in, making sure that service is there so we can deliver that fair value is important as well. So we work with Grace Church. We have about 500 brokers feeding in on how insurers can perhaps make a tweak on their e-trade system, or how they can improve here or there. And by working together constructively, collaboratively, brokers and insurers can get those better outcomes. And hopefully we can all deliver those great outcomes to customers. Because as kind of Alex said, I'm also that guy in the pub that talks about insurance the whole time. And there are so many great claim stories that we want to talk about. And I think that which painted the industry in an unfair light in some of the things that they said. I don't think it was a that much of a balanced super complaint. So I think we've still got a job to do to make sure we can reinforce trust in ultimately what is quite an intangible product for clients.
Yeah, so on that point, I mean, Alex, how are insurers adapting to this increased scrutiny around customer outcomes, and how are you supporting brokers around this?
Yeah, I mean, the expectation's clear that from a regulatory perspective, that anyone, regardless of seniority, needs to be driving for good customer outcomes. We're all obliged within our organizations to do that. I think when you think about, product value, as has been discussed, I totally agree with Graham's comments. Ultimately, this is a muscle that we've been training across brokers and insurers for the last couple of years. Frankly, innovation cycles in insurance are probably not as high as fast moving tech and some other places. So I do think like the legwork that has gone in puts us in good stead, and that ultimately, if I would have one pitch, it would be to take more of a risk-based approach to some of this, as opposed to, I think, maybe to meet regulatory expectations and ultimately exceed and outperform them. Organizations are going that extra mile, but it's having a heavy burden, and maybe it's not always kind of balanced in terms of the impact of that. So scrutiny is important. I think we've leveled up as an industry, which is brilliant, and we need to continue to do that. I think we've set a great baseline now, and it would just, for me, be about how do we take more of a kind of a focused approach to then really addressing residual concerns on value or challenges towards customer outcomes from that product value perspective. I think more broadly, everybody needs to be customer focused to win in this market. It's hand-to-hand combat out there, right, in terms of winning. So you need to know how are you performing on claims? What's your voice of customer looking like? How are your NPS results coming back? And we dissect every bit of feedback that we get from strategic brokers, trade press, data lab, wherever it may be, and we knit that together into focused activity that helps us to continuously improve our performance and identify any hotspots or potential areas for improvement that we have. And that's a ticket to the game if you want to win these days. So yeah, I think that scrutiny is driving a much bigger focus on those inputs, and then more continuous improvement, at least in our organization. But I would suggest probably more broadly with the people we would see as our sort of key competitors as well.
Yeah, great. And Amy, turning to you, is there scope, do you think, for greater consistency and standardization across the market when it comes to this kind of stuff?
Perhaps, I suppose, as Alex has said, that we should welcome this. It has allowed us to level up, and I suppose Consumer Duty, its purpose was to sort of create that common framework that we could all work within. I suppose the challenge is, as Alicia said, there is then the kind of onus on it. It varies by product, it varies by insurer, it could even vary by distribution method, it could vary by customer segment. So I think that's where the challenge lies. And I think we've very much seen that sort of relationship with our brokers. We are not here to govern our brokers. That's very much the FCA and the regulator's job. We want to be there to support and help. And I suppose it's just making sure that we can kind of approach that in a really positive way, so that perhaps we can help with that standardization rather than kind of beating them over the head, which we absolutely don't want to do. But yeah, I agree with Alex. There should be sort of no pushback to kind of challenging ourselves on what a good customer outcome is, scrutinizing what we believe a poor customer outcome is, making sure that we track those and record those and improve off the back of those. And I can absolutely see Aviva, and I'm sure our competitors as well, have changed frameworks and meetings and processes to make sure that we capture those and kind of improve our business off the back of them. But I suppose it's just finding the balance between making sure that it doesn't become an industry in itself, but it promotes good behaviours rather than kind of makes us all insular and looking internally the whole time. I think that's probably the balance that we've all got to try and achieve.
Yeah, thank you. So, Matt, are you seeing firms become more data-driven in how they evidence customer outcomes and insurer oversight?
Yeah, absolutely. We were at last month's BEBA conference, and thanks to Graham and the team for putting on another great event. But we had a number of conversations with brokers who, spoke to us about how they were moving away from maybe relying, quite heavily on historic relationships or more anecdotal feedback towards a more, I suppose, structured oversight. I think brokers increasingly want that measurable evidence. Consumer Duty has definitely, accelerated that. But I also think brokers are starting to recognise, it's not just, regulatory risk and important from that regulation point of view, but it can also improve outcomes for customers because it's helping them ensure that they're, selecting the most appropriate markets for each risk. And that, again, drives down that regulatory risk. But I think you can also support stronger outcomes for the customers, better retention, and help, drive their revenues and their overall performance as well. So there's a few wins in there, and I think people are starting to wake up to it a bit now.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Now we've had a flurry of questions coming in, which is great to see, and keep them coming. If we don't get to all of them, we'll try and answer them offline after the webinar. But one question that's come in, which is about a subject we deliberately didn't put in the agenda because there's been so much talk about it everywhere else, but I'm going to touch on it because somebody's asked us to, and it's AI. So the question is, where do the broker and insurer panelists see meaningful traction in claims technology adoption to increase NPS or improve just general claims performance? I don't know if anyone in particular wants to take that.
I don't mind jumping in there.
Great, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. I'll try and give the right answer here. I suppose you can look at it in any aspect of our industry, claims or underwriting, and I think the focus should be, and I think this is where you get some excellent outcomes, is being able to divert staff and people's attention and focus to real value add tasks. And that's where I think the greatest benefit we'll see in this industry. So, perhaps some of the sort of menial, more data-driven perhaps tasks that take up time and energy and focus, you could probably address those with AI and then free up your resource and your employees' times to kind of, as we've just said, really focus on what matters and good customer outcomes and using that sort of human skill to drive a good outcome. So that's key. We've got lots of good examples of where we're using it within Aviva, particularly claims and underwriting side, where we're getting sort of some fantastic outcomes as a result. But I think that's the key is what you can then do as a result of it by kind of removing some of the kind of more kind of onerous tasks. It frees up your people to do the better stuff. Let's be honest.
Yeah, Alex, is there anything you wanted to add there from an Allianz point of view?
Yeah, I think, look, we've it's great opportunity in things like motor claims to use AI to look at and assess damage quickly. So we're seeing benefits on that side. I think also in making sure that we can get access to the right information at the fingertips of claims handlers today. There's no doubt about it. The market is quite complex. There's lots of different wordings. Allianz have contributed to that as we see, things facilitize and brokers go in different directions about what they want to achieve. If you're a claims handler handling claims across all of that complexity, AI tools can be really, really helpful to identify differences, make sure claims are handled the right way first time. So we definitely see scope and impact here, and look forward to kind of capitalizing on the benefits.
Another question that's come in that's probably more for Alex and Amy is around how it's from Tim Stout, who says, obviously claim satisfaction is a clear priority, but with most of the major insurers performing quite well on that measure, and with so much pressure on price, how are insurers differentiating on the things that help brokers compete and stay profitable?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. So a good example of where we're trying to, think differently or act differently is we recently brought out our smart broker brief. So this was born out of a glass of wine. I probably need to stop talking about being in pubs and glass of wine, but with a broker where we were talking through the challenges that brokers face today. And ultimately it was, we want to spend more time with our clients, trying to win more, particularly in this market where you want to retain and win, and it's tough. But our execs and our handlers spend a lot of time having to prepare for those meetings, to arrive informed, to be on point, and ultimately to, again, outshine competition when you're there trying to win a new client. So we share this smart broker brief, which pulls together about 40 different data points. It has really simple information in there, like the year that a company was established, for example, because then you can see if it's coming up to 10 years. Oh, look, we can see 10th birthday, congratulations, sound informed, sound on the money in terms of prep for that meeting. But also it flags, to Amy's point earlier, under insurance, if indemnity periods might look a little bit low, where we as an insurer see higher risk for that client. So it helps have better conversations, more informed conversations. And that's something that we've been rolling out in our digital trading business for our package products. And we will look to scale more broadly. So I guess one element outside of that claims differentiation is to say, Allianz, we're asking ourselves, how do we help our brokers actually spend more time on what's important to them? That ultimately helps them to grow, leveraging the power of an insurer, which at the end of the day is largely our data and our relationships. So that's kind of one example of where we're trying to do something differently, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And Amy, is there anything you wanted to add to that about how Aviva are kind of helping brokers compete and stay profitable?
Yeah, I mean, we'll all have fantastic propositions, I suppose, that we're investing in, whether that be risk management, whether that be kind of wider wordings. I think one thing that we're trying to really double down on within Aviva is our service proposition and probably our speed of response to brokers. Again, I think Alex has already referenced it. We're not known for speed of turnaround or kind of being, I think when we compare ourselves to other industries, that can kind of come lacking quite often. But using AI, linking to the last question, we can now, if we receive a motor presentation with, I don't know, a fleet of maybe 30, 40 vehicles, even more, that can be submitted to us, ingested, enriched, put up on the system automatically, and land in the underwriter's desk, fully enriched and and even with a suggested price, allowing that underwriter to pick up the phone within hours to the broker kind of to talk about pricing, rather than sort of like that really long arduous process of having to individually key in vehicles and put rates against them. So we've totally streamlined and made that a lot quicker, and I think that allows brokers to respond to their customers quicker. I mean, ultimately, the quicker that they hear back from their insurer partners, the quicker they can be on the front foot with their customers. And that's what their customers will expect. They will not sort of understand the nuance between why the insurance industry would take so long to do certain things compared to other industries that they deal with. So I think that's bringing us up into the 21st century. And I think that allows brokers to offer a far slicker service back to their customers. Again, allowing them to compete away just from price all the time.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. So we're getting to the end of today's session, but before we close, I'd like to ask each of you briefly the same question, which is basically, what do you think will define the strongest broker-insurer relationships over the next few years? So let's start with Alicia.
Yeah, I think the strongest relationships will ultimately rely on, trust, consistency of service, claims, proposition. Data is going to really help give the broker the confidence to make those placement decisions and make sure that they are aligning themselves with partners who can demonstrate reliable performance day in, day out. So, I think it will still rely heavily on relationships. I think that's what the industry has ultimately been built on. But I think data is going to play a much more of a play around that. We're talking about fair value, we're talking about great customer outcomes, and that's got to be front and center. So the insurers that are helping the brokers deliver that to their clients will surely be the strongest relationships going forward.
Thanks. And Alex, what's your view on this? What do you think will define the strongest relationships?
Look, I'm quite a simple person. So for me, I think in many ways, strong relationships are a bit like strong marriages, right? They work best when both sides sort of show up regularly, invest consistently, and just don't let that relationship drift. So just get the basics right together in partnership, I think is key.
Okay, and Amy?
Yeah, I mean, this is an industry built on relationships, and as guys have said, that isn't changing anytime soon. And I think, especially with this market that we're in, I think it puts it to the test. And I think it's upon all of us to make sure that we are kind of still friends as and when the market changes. I think what would define relationships to come is just both insurer and broker absolutely putting the customer front and center of any decision making, any kind of conversations. And I think we're absolutely doing that. So it's not as though that is a behavior that needs to change. But I think when that really aligns and when that is working best is when the customer is front and center of any decision making. So that's probably what will define partnerships going forward.
Okay, thank you. And Graham, what's your view on this?
I think writing a lot of Beaver manifestos over the years and sitting on a lot of broker committees, it depends on the size and shape of the broker, but the things that always win through are the service, consistency of decision making, doing the right thing, accepting the less attractive risks, sometimes not just the good ones, access to decision makers, really important for insurance brokers. That attitude to claims, can do, how can we help with this claim? How can we look after this client? Having appropriate products, being a reliable partner, and these days ease of e-trade is important as well. So there's a whole shopping list from the Beaver members.
Brilliant, thank you. And finally, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's all about kind of consistency and collaboration. So Graham touched on it there. I think consistently offering good service, good outcomes, that's going to be key, and that's going to set a lot of the insurers apart. And then working with the brokers to deliver what's needed and also help their businesses. So you kind of touched on earlier by the other panelists around, working on the underinsurance problem and working on those types that help the broker look good to the customer, but also help the broker drive business. I think that's what's going to be the big ones going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. So that brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you again to Graham, Alicia, Alex, and Amy for joining me and Matt today, and to all of you for watching. As a reminder, everyone who registered for today's session will receive a copy of the Insurer Performance and Conduct Report and a recording of this session in next week's Insurance Data Lab newsletter. We'll be launching our next report on the financial performance of MGAs from our stand at next month's MGA Association conference. So I'd love to see some of you there. Our next webinar will take place soon after that, in which we'll be covering the key findings alongside a broader discussion on the landscape for MGAs. And our newsletter will also include further details about that. And if you'd like to find out more about Insurance Data Lab, or would like to see a demo of our Insight platform, which does help with some of the stuff that we've talked about today, feel free to email me at dan@insurancedataLab.com. Okay, advert over. Thanks again, and goodbye for now.